Hey everybody, this is a long and somewhat disorganized, rambly video on how I put together this built-in IKEA Billy bookcase system using their corner cabinets. I hope you learn a couple of cool details of how I put this together and it helps you complete your project. Check out the timestamps in the video description below to jump to the parts that you're interested in. Enjoy the video. IKEA Billy bookcase system with corner units. These are tips for installing this in your home. I've just mostly figured out how I'm going to do this in my house. And I should say that I'm not a YouTuber. This video is not going to have good cinematography, but it is going to contain a bunch of answers that I couldn't find when I was researching this project, specifically with how to do the corner cabinets. Okay, so my layout is 3 double width Billies, and then on each side I've got 1 corner cabinet and then 1 single width Billy. Okay, I've got height extensions across the whole thing. I'm in Canada, and at least where I am in Ontario, they don't have the double width height extension, so I had to use single width height extensions and put them together. So I'm going to show you a bunch of details. First, I'm going to talk about the center. Some things I did there before I move on to the corners, which is really like the most important and challenging thing to do. So first, let's talk about the centers. I think you probably have already realized this, and maybe that's one of the reasons you clicked on this video, which is if you want to have a built-in look, how do you achieve that, given that you're going to have gaps all the way around your Billy bookcase system, because of course these are standard width, and they will not exactly consume your available space unless you get very lucky, okay? And just like any cabinet installation, if you look at any like kitchen cabinet installation video, they have to basically cut to the exact required shape, trim work, and install that all around, okay? So I'm gonna show you some of that stuff. Okay, so first of all, the way I did this is I dry fit all of the cabinetry such that with the 3 middle ones in place, I had an equal gap on both sides. So this is completely ignoring the corner and the side cabinets. I made sure that I had an equal gap on both sides. With that in place, I then fastened these to the walls. I simply used the L brackets that came with the Billy bookcase. The way I did that with the height extensions, I'm going to show you here. I'm just going to climb up on my ladder. The way I found that I needed to do the L bracket was that I used the L bracket on the bottom part of the Billy, and you can see it here. That's attached to the wall. And then I put the height extension, I installed the height extension, and then there's this little L bracket. I think this L bracket, it came with something. One of the things I bought when I bought this Billy thing. Otherwise, you can buy these at Home Depot. They're like just 50 cents or something, a tiny little L bracket. And that's how I fastened the back to this. And with that, this whole thing is very solid. You have the cams. Oh, here's the other thing. Since I'm using only a single width, I'm only able to fasten with a cam on one side. And then there's no cam attachment here. But that's okay, because with these little L brackets, with the cam on the right and the left, and also I used a connector bolt here, which I'm going to tell you about in a second, to connect these two things together. So that's how one full double width Billy with the height extension is fastened to the wall. Then I fastened these 3 to each other. And the way I did that was with connector bolts, which are these. Again, I bought these at Home Depot. You go into the specialty screw section and you look for something called connector bolts. And all these are basically a male threaded bolt going into a female side receiver. And they thread together and then they squeeze the 2 cabinets together. You just have to make sure you get the correct length. The other cool thing is at Home Depot, if they don't have a connector bolt whose length is exactly what you need, in fact, you need it to be slightly smaller than this width, they have these things called extensions, so you can build up the exact length that you need. So just keep that in mind. I'm sorry, I can't remember what lengths I used here. So yeah, that's all I did. I drilled a hole and I used these connector bolts and I squeezed these things together. Of course, I made sure that when I did that, I used a clamp to make sure these two faces were exactly flush, clamped that in place, and then I drilled the hole and I put the connector bolts. I put one up top, I got one below, and then I have one in the, where am I? I've got one in the height extension. So with those three, this whole system is basically feeling really rock solid. Okay, so I think the center part is the easiest thing to deal with. Now let's talk about the corners. So the way Billy bookcase system works for corners is you simply buy a single width Billy, and they give you, or no, you have to buy corner brackets. And the corner brackets, I have some extras, which I'm going to show you. Hold on a sec here. You buy these corner brackets, these V-shaped brackets. These establish the required angle that work with the Billy system. And these brackets, there's the big V bracket is installed at the bottom. You can find lots of videos about this. So this is the tip of the V and it goes out like this. And you basically insert the two bottoms of the left and the right side of the angle into that bracket. And that basically establishes the angle. And then at the top, that bracket package comes with a top side bracket to establish the angle at the top. Now, here are a couple of tips for this. First of all, this bracket and the big V bracket down there, these things are really flimsy. So once you screw these in place, do not move these cabinets. I made that mistake. I ended up bending these out of shape. It screwed everything up and I had to go buy other ones. So once you screwed these in, do not move anything. Second of all, let's see, I used the cam bolt as the bolt to fasten these in. When you buy the bracket package, it comes with its own screws because I think they assume you're not going to use the height extension. So to combine the corner bracket with the height extension, I use the cam bolt to screw these in. Another tip is once you drive this in, really try to not remove it. Like try not to make a mistake because this is all particle board. I took this in and out a bunch of times and it just makes the hole bigger and you just don't get a really tight fit. So really try to just drive this home exactly once. Okay, what else can I tell you? Now, I was not comfortable with having only this bracket on the top. So I supplemented with a piece of plumber's strapping. This is a super common product. You've seen it in your house. They use this to like hold copper pipes up into your framing. So I bought a roll of this and I just, cut a strip to length. And then I marked 2 holes on either side with a Sharpie. And then I pre-drilled some holes and I used some small screws. And this basically just gives it some bracing at the back. I've got one on the right and one on the left. I'm going to be installing the height extensions after this. Okay, so let's talk about what I found to be the most confusing part, which is the gapping on the left and the right. So let's take a look at this. Hold on, just bear with me for a second. Let me take a step back. Okay, so obviously there's going to be a gap at the top. You know that. Now on the left and the right side, what ends up happening is once you establish this angle, and this angle is basically sort of mandated by IKEA when you use their brackets, you end up with a gap behind this side cabinet. And this is the gap. And obviously this gap is something we're gonna have to fill later to make this thing look built in. I'm gonna talk about that in a second. Hold on a second. But not only that, there's a question of how do you fasten the corner cabinet and the side cabinet to the wall with the L brackets when you've got this big gap. So the way I did it is pretty simple. You've already started to see it. Hold on a second. Okay. All I did was I came up here and I measured the gap to the wall and I put in a piece of dimensional lumber whose width is just smaller than this gap. For me, in this case, I believe it was 1.5 inches Turns out that a 2x4 is exactly the thickness you need. Now the key here is you do not have to fill this gap exactly. You just need to put in some dimensional lumber that is just smaller than the gap, because whatever gap remains, that little tiny micro gap that has to be filled, is actually compensated for by the L brackets. These L brackets have a slot. So you start the screw halfway and then you can slide the L bracket back and forth to make up that tiny gap that remains. You don't need any shims or anything like that. That worked out really, really well. I want to show you the other side now. Now, of course, oops, that's the thing with rooms. Every room in your house, nothing is square, level, or plumb. So on this side, even though when I placed the middle cabinets, I ensured that the gap on the left and the right side was equal, that doesn't mean the gap on this side to the wall is equal to the gap on the other side. So here you can see a piece of 2x4 was not enough. So I laminated a scrap piece of, I think this is 1/4 inch OSB. I simply laminated these two things together with like a couple of screws, and then I fastened this to the wall. I have one screw into a stud, and then I just didn't have a stud on this side. So just a little trick here. I used a spade bit to drill about halfway in. Then I used a toggle bolt to go into the wall, and I drove that home. This is pretty secure, okay? Same idea with the slotted L brackets. So in the end, what we have now, I'm gonna come back to this side. In the end, what we have now is we have a consistent gap that we gotta fill, but this cabinet is like really secure. Now you'll notice that this cabinet is not fastened to anything. You know, I don't think it's really that easy to do because you've got a triangular space back there, but it turns out that doesn't really seem necessary because you've got the two connectors that I have at the top, and this thing feels pretty solid. And it should not topple over. Your kids, you know, should be fine. Okay, so what other tricks can I tell you? Okay, so how am I gonna do the trim work? So IKEA does not seem to make this easy for the Billy bookcase system. They don't have any information about how to do the trim, so I kind of have had to make it up on my own. I found, and my particular challenge is the fact that I'm using the height extension, so I'm going almost 8 feet tall. So the way I'm gonna cover the gap on the left and the right, my thought is to basically do like a gable end, just like they do in a kitchen. And I found in this same walnut, they call it the walnut effect color, in the same color in the kitchen section of the website, kitchen cabinet section, I think they call it a panel. It's essentially a gable end. It's a sheet with this color that's almost the size of a piece of plywood. It's like 96 inches tall and 3 or 4 feet wide. So I am gonna cut a sheet and scribe it to the wall and basically laminate it to the side of this cabinet, floor to ceiling, and that's gonna cover up everything, and then I'll caulk the edge, and then everything should be hidden. And I'll do the same on that side. I'm hoping to get both the left and the right panels from one sheet of that stuff. Now, what am I gonna do for the top? I'm not exactly sure. This is a like 12-foot span, and obviously I don't think they have anything that's that long. So I may have to buy another one of those panels I mentioned and just basically do like a butt joint somewhere in the middle. Or you can get, you know, if you look at any video on how to run long spans of crown molding or trim, there are much fancier ways to get like a really clean joint that, where you can't really see the joint, but I don't care. No one in my house is gonna notice a butt joint. So that's my plan. Okay, so that's it. That's how this whole Billy bookcase corner system works. Oh, another gotcha. If you do a corner bookcase, you cannot use a door in the corner. I haven't put my glass doors on yet, but I'm having doors on everything. So I'll have a door on the double, I'll have a door on the right side, but you can't put a door in the middle. That's what the website says. And it's probably because the way the corners sort of angle each other, the doors are not able to swing open. I decided to just leave that be. Okay, some other cool things, I guess. Sorry, I'm just keep rambling on. Is you should be aware of any outlets that get covered by your billy. So for example, on both the left and right, in my case, I lost an outlet. And so what I did was, before I installed all this, I removed all, you have to do this too, you got to remove all the baseboard behind here so that the cabinets can be, flush against the wall, no gap. And I took the time to basically daisy chain off of the hidden outlet here and put new outlets on the outside. So don't lose any outlets. Outlets are really important, okay? And if you have anything you want to expose, you can do little cutouts, like I have a little Ethernet port there. But the other thing is, I took the time to buy a small 3-foot extension cord, plug it into that hidden outlet, and just bring it out and put it here. And this gives me the chance to stick any small electronics in here. Probably I'm gonna put my router here, maybe drill through the cabinets inside, hook up to my Ethernet port, something like that. Same on this side, I've got a little clean hole there. By the way, when you drill through this really thin backing, think about using some masking tape or something to make that hole really clean. Same when you drill this hole. I screwed this up once and I learned my lesson. The way you do this is you drill from one side and you watch on the other side, and just when you see the tip of your drill bit coming through, you stop. And then you come to this side and you finish the hole going the other way, and you can make sure that you get a pretty clean drill hole. Okay, so I think I'm gonna stop here. Sorry for the terrible camera work, but I hope that explains to you how to do a corner billy bookcase system, built-in style. Hopefully I will augment this video with a final one that shows you the final product. All right, peace out. All right, so here's the final product. Everything is done. All the finishing trim is installed, doors are on, everything's done, and I think it looks great. So I'm now gonna take you through a couple of the finishing details and some tricks that I use to make this look what I think is pretty nice. And remember, I have no experience doing this. I did all of this for the first time. Okay, let's first talk about the left and right panels. So that panel and that panel. If you remember from the previous segment, these side cabinets are actually coming off of the wall by about 2 inches. And if you remember, I've got a 2x4 hidden up there to which the cabinet is fastened, and that's what gives it all of the strength. But to hide that 2-inch gap, and there's also a gap on that cabinet, I cut this panel, and like I mentioned, I bought a 3x8 panel in the walnut effect color from the kitchen section. It's the Forbattra, I believe it's called. And I cut 2 of these panels, one for this side, one from that side, and I used up the 2 finished edges. So I cut this from one side and the other panel from the other side, so the finished edge is sticking out. And I ended up getting a perfect scribe to the wall. Neither of my walls are perfectly straight or plumb. They're slanted, just like they will be in your house. And I watched a number of videos on YouTube about cabinet scribing, and I'm gonna link a couple in the description that I found the most useful. I did this for the first time, and I basically got a perfect scribe. There is not even enough space to fit your fingernail behind this piece that I thought I would have to caulk that seam against the wall. I don't even have to do that because that's how tight it came out. I also got really clean cuts, no chip out. The way I did that was, once I scribed the cut line onto the panel, I found some other tricks on YouTube that said that you use painter's tape on the cut line on both sides, and you put the finished side down. I should also say that I made a track saw jig, so you can go on YouTube and search for track saw jig. That's a simple way to make a 8-foot long jig that lets you make perfectly straight cuts with your home circular saw, just from a normal piece of plywood. So I used a track saw jig. I scribed the line, I used the painter's tape, and I put the finished side facing down. I also am using a normal like framing Diablo brand blade, not a fine tooth blade. And with that setup, I got perfectly crisp cuts, no chip out whatsoever. Okay, so that's the left and right panels. The way they're fastened is simply with screws on the inside of the cabinet. No fancy screws, just whatever I had laying around that was deep enough. So I just have like a couple of screws zigzagging down. Of course, always pre-drill. Another tip is I have the baseboard cut almost perfectly to length on both sides. And I think I mentioned this in the last video. When I removed the baseboard all behind here when the project started, since I didn't know exactly where this cabinet, the side cabinet, would land, I ensured that I left about 1 or 2 inches of baseboard that was sitting behind this cabinet. And once I had the cabinets installed, I knew exactly where they were going to be, I knew exactly the thickness of this panel, I then was able to mark the exactly correct line and make a perfect cut using the oscillating multi-tool. That's how everyone on YouTube does it. Okay, now let's talk about the top filler. So the way I did that was, well, after I cut the left and right panel from the 3x8 panel, I had the middle section remaining. And I basically measured, what I found was that my ceiling kind of waves a little bit. It's like taller in some places and closer to the cabinetry in others. Rather than try to scribe this long filler piece on the top, I just found the shortest length and I cut all the segments at that length. So you don't have a perfectly flush seating to the ceiling, but I think that's fine. I don't think anyone can really tell, and it looks really good. I should say that at this point of the project, I decided I'm not gonna cut any miters. So I literally cut one segment, a separate segment for the corner, one long segment for the middle, and then again, another segment for the corner, another segment for the right. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different segments. I just measured and cut, and I have them just sitting on the top loose. I just kind of jiggled them with my hand into position so that they were sort of butting up against each other, and they are not fastened, they are not cut miters, and it's looking just fine. If I had a finished nailer, I would shoot some nails upwards and get them secure. So if you have that at home, I suggest you do that. But if you don't, just let them sit on top like me. I don't think anything's gonna knock these over. It looks pretty good. Okay, let's talk about door alignment. So in my experience trying to get these doors kind of aligned, alignment means that the spacing between all of the doors is approximately the same. This was very challenging. And the instructions for this door installation, I believe this is called the Oxberg door. They do say that the hinge allows you to have 3 dimensions of adjustment. You can adjust the door in and out. You can adjust the door up and down. Both of those dimensional adjustments actually work just fine. But the third adjustment, which is the adjustment left and right, that really doesn't work. It does not work particularly well. I found that the adjustment screw gives you a little bit of play, but even when I fully removed the adjustment screw, which would put the door into its like baseline position, many of the doors were just slightly crooked. And there's no way that I can tell to get around that because it's the baseline position for the door and you make adjustments from that position. And it was really difficult to get the door to be straight while also maintaining a consistent gap. So I basically did the best job I could. If I were to come in close, you'll see that some of the gaps are not really consistent with other doors. I think that's just a limitation of the Billy bookcase system. You'll also notice that the corner cabinets do not have doors. And that is, again, a limitation of the Billy system. It's not really a limitation, I guess. It's just the physics of having this corner cabinet. They say that you cannot have a door when you have doors on either side. If you forego the doors on either side, then you can have a door in the corner cabinet. Of course, that would be weird. but I have doors on either side, so you cannot have a door in the middle. And that's just because there's not enough room for the door to swing open. It'll be hitting the other doors. Okay, now let's talk about another alignment thing. So one thing I found is in order to make the bottom door aligned with the top door in this kind of front plane, what I found was that I not only had to, of course, use this little nub, bumper sticker that they give you, but I found that I needed to put a second bumper sticker there so that these two stickers butt up against each other, which brings the bottom door out a little bit, and that makes it aligned with the top. And that makes perfect sense. That's what you would expect because, and I'm going to show you here, when you install the height extension left and right wall has this kind of protrusion beyond the shelf, okay? And that makes this aligned with, the side panel of the bottom Billy bookcase. But the thing that stops the door from closing is the shelf, which is a little bit inward. So I hope that makes sense. There's just more of a gap than you expect that you have to close. Another thing I did was I went on Amazon and I bought some BLUM brand soft close mechanisms. This hinge from IKEA does not have a soft close attachment. The other hinges, like the kitchen cabinet hinges from IKEA, have it, but this does not, according to my research. So I went and I bought a soft close mechanism which just installs in the corner of every door. It's very easy to do. I'll put a link in the description, and I think that's important for glass doors, and you can see that it just works really well. I just let the door close and it slowly closes on its own. It's actually super awesome. Okay, so we got the soft close. Oh yeah, let's talk about another alignment thing. This is a little trick that I used to help me get the positions of the top doors correct. So the way I installed all of the doors, and then I came back and I did all the alignment so I could step back and take a look at everything holistically. But the way I did the alignment top to bottom is I first loosened these screws for all 3 hinges of the bottom door. And then I let the door drop down to the maximum position. So I should say that to the lowest position. So you can see that the screw is at the very top of the slot, which means that the door is at the bottommost position. And I locked that in for all of the doors. With that in place, the way I set the upper door, let me just show you, I'll show you on this one. The way I set the upper door was I opened both doors, I loosened the 2 hinges on the top door, and then I put a spacer. And the spacer that I used, you can use anything that's the appropriate thickness, is a piece of Romex electrical wire that I have. This happens to be, maybe slightly less than a 1/4 inch thick. And then I took this and I actually used 2 of them. And I put one, I didn't show you. I put 1 piece there, I put 1 piece over there, and that basically pushes the top door up by the thickness of this. And then I slightly closed both doors, and then I reached in with one hand with my impact, and I screwed the 2 screws tight. Okay, so that's just one idea for getting your top to bottom, basically that space right there, getting that to what you want. What else can I tell you? Another thing to note, hopefully I mentioned this in the last video, is be mindful of any outlets you're covering up. So I installed an outlet on either side, which is daisy chained off of the outlet I covered up. But just also as some insurance, I cut a little hole and I used a 3-foot extension cord that's connected to that outlet back there. This gives me access to this. I can put a lamp, I can drill holes upward, I can do whatever I want. I have power there if I ever want it. Okay, so I think overall, that's pretty much it. I'm extremely happy with how this turned out, and I hope you've learned how to do a Billy bookcase corner system and deal with all of the trim work when these cabinets do not exactly fit your available space. Please comment below if you have any questions or comments. See you later.